All right, Marine, listen up. Today, we're going deep on something crucial, something that keeps the Marine Corps running. We're talking logistics, sustainment. The nuts and bolts are all laid out in MCDP 10, and that's our focus for this deep dive.
You got it. MCDP 10, Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 10, it's all about sustainment, keeping the Corps fighting fit, from the big strategic decisions to the gear you use every day in the field.
Okay, so before we even get into the meat of it, we've got to make sure we're all speaking the same language. MCDP 10 starts off by distinguishing between a few key terms: sustainment, logistics, and combat service support. What's the difference? Got to get that squared away.
Sure, think of sustainment like the ultimate goal. It's making sure Marines have what they need, the resources, support, everything to get the job done no matter how long it takes. Then you've got logistics, and that's the action part, the planning, coordination, execution of actually getting those resources where they need to be right when they're needed.
So logistics is like the roadmap and the delivery truck, all in one.
Exactly, and then there's combat service support. That's where the rubber meets the road, the hands-on stuff in the field, your mechanics keeping vehicles up, the medical folks patching people up, supply Marines getting chow and ammo to the front lines. It's the direct support that keeps a fighting force in the fight.
So if sustainment is the why, logistics is the how, and combat service support is the who, making it happen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And here's a big takeaway from MCDP 10. Even though, as a Marine, you're mostly dealing with tactical logistics, the day-to-day needs of your mission, it's crucial to understand how it all connects: strategic, operational, and tactical. They all work together.
Interlocking parts, like a well-oiled machine.
Right, so let's zoom out for a second, up to the strategic level. This is where the commandant and the top brass operate. They're looking at the big picture, the nation's resources, factories, shipyards, the people back home, and using all that to build and maintain the military capabilities needed for any operation.
So we're talking big stuff, building bases, getting equipment, making sure there are enough trained Marines. That's all strategic logistics.
You got it. And it's about making sure the Marine Corps can answer the call no matter what. Supporting different combatant commands around the world, the commandant has to be ready for anything from humanitarian aid to full-blown conflict.
That's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay, let's step down the ladder to the operational level. Where does that fit in?
Operational logistics, well, it's the bridge between the big strategic goals and what's happening on the ground. It's about getting forces ready, moving them, putting them in the right position to achieve those goals, setting the stage for success in the theater of operations.
So it's more than just having supplies. It's having the right troops in the right place at the right time, ready to go.
Absolutely. That's where the Marine Corps Component Commander comes in. That's the general in charge of all Marine forces in a certain area or operation. They work with tactical logisticians like yourself to plug any gaps in support. They're also thinking ahead about force closure, sustainment, reconstitution, and redeployment, all those phases outlined in MCDP 10.
Force closure. That's a term I haven't heard before.
Yeah, force closure is all about making sure your unit and everything you need, all your equipment, gets to the operational areas safe and sound, ready to fight. Then you've got sustainment, keeping you supplied and supported. Reconstitution is getting units back in fighting shape after an engagement, reorganizing, replacing losses, repairs, that kind of thing. And then, of course, there's redeployment, getting everybody and everything back home efficiently and safely.
Man, logistics is way more involved than I thought. But let's get down to where the action is, stuff that affects you directly, tactical logistics.
This is where all your training kicks in, and where the Marine Air Ground Task Force, the MedGTF, really shines. It's flexible. It can adapt its combat service support depending on the mission. And that's because of elements like the Logistics Combat Element, or LCE, and the Aviation Combat Element, the ACE.
So the LCE, that's like the heart of tactical logistics for a Med GTF.
Pretty much. They make sure the supplies are moving, maintenance is happening, all those essential support functions are running smoothly. And the ACE. They're crucial for getting supplies where they need to be, especially those hard-to-reach spots or when you need things fast.
Here's something that really struck me in MCDP 10. It says that a Med GTF goes out with enough supplies to operate independently for 15 to 60 days. That's a lot of supplies.
It is. That initial self-sufficiency buys time for the higher levels of logistics to kick in and set up those more permanent supply chains. It's that initial push that's vital in the early stages of any operation.
Okay, so within tactical logistics, MCDP 10 breaks things down further into 6 functional areas. We've got supply, maintenance, distribution and transportation, general engineering, health services, and other services.
Think of it like this. Supply makes sure you've got the ammo to fight. Maintenance keeps your vehicles and weapons running. Distribution and transportation get everything where it needs to be, which is no small feat in a combat zone. And general engineering, they handle the infrastructure, roads, bridges, field hospitals, all that.
Then there's health services, obviously taking care of Marines, keeping everyone healthy and ready to fight. But other services, that seems pretty broad.
It covers a wide range, dispersing pay, handling mail, anything and everything that keeps Marines focused on the mission. And MCDP 10 really emphasizes this. Logistics doesn't happen in a vacuum. We're increasingly in joint and multinational operations.
Meaning you could be working alongside the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, even forces from allied nations, all depending on this coordinated logistics system.
Exactly. It makes things more complex, but also creates huge opportunities. You can draw on the strengths of each service or nation to create a truly flexible and robust logistics network. Coordination is key. Now, stepping back up to the strategic level for a moment, let's talk about the big players in strategic logistical support.
Lay it on me.
You've got the United States Transportation Command, or US Transcom. They're in charge of the entire defense transportation system that's moving troops and cargo by air, land, and sea. Think of them like the global shipping company for the military.
Then there's the Department of Transportation. They usually handle civilian transportation, but in emergencies, they work with U.S. Transcom to support national defense.
And then we have the powerhouse, the Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA. They make sure the entire military and sometimes even other government agencies have the supplies and materials they need anywhere, anytime. From everyday things to specialized equipment, they even handle disposal of outdated materials, full life cycle support.
We've talked about getting things where they need to go. MCDP 10 calls that strategic mobility. Can you break that down, how it works?
Strategic mobility is all about getting forces to the fight quickly and effectively, and the MEF, the Marine Expeditionary Force, is all about rapid response. And they use all three main methods: sea lift, airlift, and prepositioning.
Okay, so Sea Lift uses ships to move a lot of equipment and personnel. Airlift gets things there fast using cargo planes. And prepositioning is having supplies and equipment already in place around the world.
Bingo. The MEF is designed to use all three, making it incredibly flexible, ready to respond anywhere in the world.
Now, what about operational logistics support? That's the next step down, right? What's involved? Who's running the show?
At the operational level, the Marine Corps Component Commander takes on even more responsibility. It's not just coordination anymore, it's actively managing sustainment sourcing, allocating transportation within the theater, developing infrastructure like bases and facilities.
So they're the ones making sure the entire logistics system in their area is working and supporting the Marines on the ground.
Exactly. And one of their most important jobs is reconstitution, getting units back up to full strength after combat. This could be reorganizing, replacing casualties, repairing equipment, replenishing supplies. It's about making sure the Marine Corps can keep fighting.
Making sure we can keep going, even after losses or setbacks.
You got it. And while sometimes you need a dedicated operational logistics organization, MCDP 10 says whenever possible, the existing MGTF structure and any existing theater support should be the first choice.
Keep it streamlined, efficient. Makes sense. Now, how about command and control in all this? Who's calling the shots and making sure things run smoothly?
Effective command and control for logistics, it's like the nervous system of the whole operation. It makes sure the right resources get where they need to be at the right time, which means maximum combat power. You've got G4s at different command levels. Those are the staff officers responsible for all things logistics. At the joint level, where the different services are working together, you have the J4, who coordinates logistics across all the services.
So the J4 makes sure the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are all on the same page when it comes to logistics.
Precisely. And then you've got commanders of specific elements, like the commander, Naval Air Force, Pacific Atlantic. They have a big role in coordinating aviation logistics.
Aviation logistics, that's a whole other world, with its own challenges and needs. Now, what about some of the specific tools the Corps uses for logistical support? Let's start with the big ones. The Maritime Prepositioning Forces, or MPS. They're like those giant floating warehouses, right?
That's a good way to put it. They're specialized ships, loaded with tons of equipment and supplies enough to support something like 17,600 Marines. They're strategically placed around the world, ready to respond quickly.
So if something happens, Marines can hit the ground running without waiting for those traditional supply lines to be set up. Incredible.
It is, and the MPFs carry a lot of aviation support equipment too, so you can rapidly deploy air power as well. It's like a mobile military base right off the coast.
And to keep all those aircraft flying, we've got the aviation logistics support ships. They provide maintenance and support while at sea, so the Corps can maintain air power even when on the move.
It's like a floating repair shop, ready to handle routine maintenance or even more complicated repairs, keeping those aircraft ready for action.
Then there's the Norway Geo-Prepositioning Program, which is similar to the MPF concept, but using underground facilities in Norway for storage.
That's right. This program gives the Corps a lot of pre-positioned equipment in a strategically important area, ready to go if needed. It's another way the Corps stays ready to respond quickly with a forward presence.
And we can't forget war reserve material. Those are stockpiles of essential supplies and equipment, pre-positioned, ready to go if a conflict breaks out.
These stockpiles give the Corps the ability to quickly ramp up operations without solely relying on production and supply chains, which can be vulnerable during a crisis. It's like a safety net of resources. Now, let's talk about the supporting establishment, the organizations that make all of this possible.
Okay, break it down for me.
First up, you've got the Marine Corps Combat Development Command. They're the brains of the operation, researching and developing future logistics capabilities, figuring out how to make the Corps even better at supporting its forces.
So they're the ones looking ahead, thinking about future challenges, coming up with new solutions.
Exactly. Then there's the Marine Corps Systems Command. They're responsible for buying and managing the life cycle of all the equipment and information systems the Corps uses, weapons, vehicles, software, the whole nine yards.
They're the ones making sure the Corps has the right tools and that those tools are maintained and upgraded as needed.
Then there's the Marine Corps Logistics Command, providing both service level and operational level support. They manage the pre-positioned stocks, handle depot level repairs, the big stuff that keeps equipment running smoothly.
The backbone of the system, making sure everything is flowing and functioning as it should.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the Marine Corps Installations Command. They're responsible for the infrastructure that supports everything: bases, training ranges, barracks, housing, everything Marines need to live and work.
They're the ones making sure the Corps has the physical spaces and resources it needs, from training to deployment.
You got it. And of course, there are also Department of the Navy agencies that provide specialized support. Organizations like the Naval Supply Systems Command, Naval Air Systems Command, and a few others.
So it's a pretty complex network of organizations all working together to make sure the Marine Corps is logistically ready for any mission.
That's right. And the Navy and Marine Corps are increasingly working to integrate their logistics capabilities, something called naval logistics integration.
So breaking down the walls between the services and creating a more efficient flow of resources.
Exactly. This integration is already being implemented for MEUs, Marine Expeditionary Units, those highly mobile, self-contained forces.
We've covered a lot of ground here. It's pretty amazing how much goes into making sure the Marine Corps has what it needs to operate effectively.
It's just the tip of the iceberg, really. We've laid the groundwork, but now we're going to dive into how all this plays out in the real world, what it means for you as a Marine.
Stay with us for part 2, where we'll dig into the role of the operating forces in logistics and how MCDP 10 guides your actions on the ground.
All right, welcome back. We just went through that massive system supporting Marines, but now let's focus on the tip of the spear, the operating forces, the ones on the ground engaging the enemy. You know, MCDP 10 really drives home the point that everything we talked about, all those resources and planning, it all boils down to supporting the Marines in the fight.
Yeah, all those logistics folks are working hard behind the scenes, but it's the Marines on the ground who are putting those resources to use.
That's it. And MCDP 10 makes it crystal clear. The operating forces aren't just sitting there waiting for supplies. You're active participants. You have a crucial role in making the system work.
It's not just a one-way street with supplies coming down from headquarters. Marines on the ground have responsibilities too, right? What does that look like practically?
MCDP 10 lays it out pretty clearly. Commanders at all levels, from fire team leaders to battalion commanders, they're all responsible for anticipating their logistical needs, communicating those needs up the chain of command, and managing their resources effectively.
Makes sense. The guys closest to the action often know best what they need to get the job done. Anything else MCDP 10 say about those on-the-ground responsibilities?
It stresses minimizing your logistical footprint, being smart about the resources you use, avoiding waste, and streamlining operations to reduce reliance on those complicated supply chains.
So it's about efficiency, Resourcefulness, not just assuming supplies will magically appear. Every Marine has a part to play in using resources wisely.
Absolutely. Now, here's something to think about information. On today's battlefield, information itself is a logistical element.
Information as logistics. How do you figure that?
Think about it. Having good information, the right information at the right time, that's crucial for keeping the whole system running smoothly. Commanders need to know what supplies are available, where they are, how fast they can get to where they're needed. They got to track maintenance requests,
Mm.
personnel movements, all those details that keep a force operational.
Like a real-time map of the entire logistics network, showing everything moving. Without that, the system falls apart.
Exactly. That's why the Marine Corps uses all these sophisticated information systems, software, communication networks to manage the flow of logistics information. These systems allow for tracking, processing, and sharing information so everyone's in the loop and can make good decisions.
Technology, big part of everything these days, and logistics isn't an exception.
You got it. But here's a crucial point MCDP 10 brings up protecting that information. Adversaries are always looking for ways to disrupt our operations, and messing with our logistics information can have serious consequences.
So cybersecurity is part of logistics too.
Absolutely. Keeping those systems and networks secure is crucial, but it goes beyond technology. It comes down to the individual Marine. MCDP 10 is very clear about this. Every Marine, no matter what your rank or MOS, you have a responsibility to keep that logistics system running efficiently.
So logistics isn't just the responsibility of the LCE.
Not at all. It's all hands on deck. Every Marine plays a role.
Okay, what are some specific things every Marine can do to make sure that logistics system is effective?
Well, it starts with accountability. You're responsible for the gear and supplies you're given. Take care of your equipment, report any damage or loss right away, make sure everything's properly maintained. It also means being mindful of resource consumption. Don't waste stuff, conserve whenever you can, and only request what you absolutely need for the mission. And don't forget communication. Provide timely and accurate info about your unit's needs and the status of your resources.
It might seem like small stuff, but if every Marine does their part, it makes the big difference in how well the system works. It's about having a logistics mindset, right?
That's it. MCDP 10 talks about developing that logistics mindset, approaching everything you do, every mission, with an understanding of the logistics involved.
So not just focusing on the tactical objective, but also thinking about what resources are needed and what logistical challenges you might face. Being proactive, thinking ahead.
You got it. That kind of thinking is crucial in today's complex and unpredictable environments. Now, this might sound a little strange, but MCDP 10 also emphasizes constrained logistics.
Constrained logistics. What's that all about?
It can be tough. It's when logistical support is limited. Could be intentional or because of things beyond our control. Think austere environments, remote locations, supply lines being disrupted or attacked.
Those situations where you can't count on that steady flow of supplies sounds like something every Marine needs to be prepared for.
Absolutely. That's why MCDP 10 talks about the importance of training for those scenarios. You got to be able to operate effectively even when you don't have the level of support you're used to.
What does that kind of training look like?
It's about honing those skills of improvisation, resourcefulness, being able to prioritize, making do with what you have, adapting to changes, and still accomplishing the mission.
Classic Marine Corps, adapt and overcome.
Exactly. But embracing constrained logistics doesn't mean lowering your standards or accepting mediocrity. It's about finding creative ways to stay effective, even with those logistical challenges.
So it's about shifting your mindset, focusing on what's truly essential for mission success, figuring out how to achieve your objective, even with limited resources.
That's it. And MCDP 10 outlines specific strategies for operating in those kinds of environments. One of the key principles is distributed logistics. Decentralizing things, pushing supplies and support closer to where they're needed.
Instead of relying on one central hub, you're creating a more flexible network, multiple points of supply and support.
Right. If one supply route gets cut off, you've got other options. MCDP 10 also highlights the importance of host nation support and interagency cooperation in these situations.
Working with partner nations, civilian organizations, other U.S. government agencies that can really help to offset those limitations.
Absolutely. It's about building relationships, coordinating efforts, leveraging everyone's strengths to overcome those challenges. Now let's talk about a concept that's closely linked to constrained logistics, expeditionary logistics.
That seems like a natural fit for the Marine Corps, always ready to deploy quickly and operate in challenging environments.
You got it. MCDP 10 defines expeditionary logistics as the ability to project and sustain logistics in tough and uncertain environments. Taking that expertise and using it in situations where you might not have those traditional support systems.
Like setting up forward operating bases, creating flexible supply chains, making sure Marines have what they need in even the most remote and austere locations.
Exactly. And MCDP 10 points out some key characteristics of expeditionary logistics. First, agility, being able to adapt quickly to changing conditions, make adjustments on the fly. Then, scalability, expanding or contracting those logistical capabilities based on the mission. And of course, sustainability, maintaining that support over time, even in tough conditions.
It's like building a lifeline that can reach anywhere in the world, no matter how difficult it gets.
Great analogy. But MCDP 10 is clear that it's not just about reacting. It's about thinking ahead, anticipating future needs, and getting those resources in place beforehand.
Not just waiting for things to happen, you're thinking ahead. What could go wrong? And planning how to address those challenges.
Exactly. And that means having a deep understanding of where you're operating, potential threats, and the logistics you'll need to support the mission. You got to be proactive and have solutions ready. Now, let's talk about risk management. With all the moving parts in logistics, a lot can go wrong.
That's for sure. MCDP 10 acknowledges that risk is just part of logistics. Can't get rid of it completely, but you can manage it effectively.
You're right. MCDP 10 makes it clear risk is baked into any logistical operation. You can't eliminate it, but you can manage it.
So what does effective risk management look like when we're talking about logistics?
First, you got to identify the potential risks, everything from running out of supplies to transportation delays to enemy attacks on your convoys. Then you assess how likely those risks are and how bad the impact would be if they did happen. And finally, you come up with a mitigation strategies plans for what to do if those risks actually materialize.
So you got to have a backup plan, maybe even a plan C, and be ready to adapt if things go sideways.
Exactly. And MCDP 10 really emphasizes integrating risk management into every step of logistics planning and execution. It's not just something for headquarters to worry about. Everyone involved needs to be thinking about risk and what to do about it.
So from the Marine driving a supply truck to the commander planning an operation, everybody's got a role in managing risk.
You got it. Effective risk management requires communication and coordination up and down the chain. Everybody needs to know the risks, the mitigation plans, their part in making the mission a success. Now, MCDP 10 points to a specific type of risk that's super important in the world today, supply chain security.
Supply chains, those intricate networks that get everything to where it needs to be, from raw materials to finished products. I can see how those could be vulnerable to disruption.
Exactly. Today's supply chains are global and super interconnected. You've got multiple countries involved, a whole bunch of companies and organizations. That creates vulnerabilities. If there's a disruption or an attack anywhere in that chain, it can have a ripple effect throughout the whole system.
So something happening on the other side of the world could affect the supplies Marines rely on.
That's right. That's why MCDP 10 says it's so important to protect the integrity and security of those supply chains.
How do we do that?
One important step is vetting suppliers and transportation providers very carefully. Make sure they're reliable, trustworthy, and meet security standards. It's also about physical security, protecting cargo and transportation assets from theft, sabotage, or damage. And then there's cybersecurity, which is critical for protecting the information systems that manage all this stuff.
Sounds like a multi-pronged approach is needed, lots of different players involved.
You got it. And MCDP 10 stresses the importance of collaboration, working with partner nations, private industry, other agencies to share information, coordinate efforts, and build a more secure and resilient global supply chain.
Teamwork, just like everything else in logistics. In this fast-changing world, staying ahead of the game is key. What does MCDP 10 say about innovation in logistics?
MCDP 10 recognizes that the Marine Corps has to adapt and innovate constantly to maintain its edge. Can't just stick with the old ways of doing things. New technologies, new approaches, new ways of thinking. That's what's needed to keep up with how warfare is evolving.
So what are we seeing in terms of innovation? Give me some examples.
Well, we're seeing big advances in using unmanned systems for logistics. Things like drones delivering supplies, autonomous vehicles transporting cargo. They can operate more efficiently, even in dangerous areas, keeping Marines safe. Then there's 3D printing, which could completely change how we make and distribute spare parts and supplies. It's like having a portable factory, making custom parts on demand, reducing the need for those long, vulnerable supply chains.
Sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
I know, right? But it's becoming a reality. And then there's data analytics and artificial intelligence, which we can use to streamline those logistical processes. We can use data to predict what we'll need, make supply chains smoother, and make better decisions about how to allocate resources.
So we're using data to anticipate problems and get ahead of them, not just react after the fact.
Exactly. These are just a few ways the Corps is innovating in logistics to stay ahead of the curve.
Logistics is never static, it's always changing, so we got to be committed to improving and adapting. But all the fancy technology and innovation in the world doesn't mean much without good leadership. What's MCDP 10 say about leadership and logistics?
MCDP 10 is very clear on this point. Strong leadership is absolutely essential for success. Just having systems and processes isn't enough. You need leaders who can inspire, motivate, and guide their teams to achieve those logistical objectives, no matter how tough it gets.
So what makes a good leader in the world of logistics? What are we looking for?
A good logistics leader needs to understand the whole system, inside and out. They need to be able to foresee challenges and make smart decisions. They got to be great communicators, able to explain complicated stuff and get everyone on the same page. And they have to be adaptable, innovative, ready to adjust to changing situations, and find creative solutions to unexpected problems.
Be able to think on their feet, comfortable with the uncertainty of military operations.
You got it. But probably most importantly, they need to be people-focused.
What does that mean in logistics?
It means remembering that you're supporting those Marines on the front lines. Their well-being and their ability to get the job done, that's what it all comes down to.
It's about remembering that there are real people behind all those supplies and equipment, that our job in logistics is to make sure those people have what they need.
That's the heart of it. Good logistics leadership means being technically proficient and genuinely caring about the people you're supporting. It's about building a system that's efficient and humane.
As we're wrapping up this part, I want to touch on something that's vital for any organization that wants to keep getting better continuous process improvement. What does MCDP 10 say about how the Marine Corps approaches this in logistics?
MCDP 10 acknowledges that the way we do logistics has to constantly evolve. Can't just set something up and assume it'll work forever. You got to constantly look for ways to improve.
Always learning, always adapting, always trying to do better, even when you think you've got it figured out.
That's the mindset. And continuous process improvement involves a few key things. First, you got to figure out what needs fixing. That means looking at data, getting feedback from the Marines doing the work, and figuring out where the system is slowing down or having issues. Then you come up with solutions, new approaches, new technologies, find ways to make those processes run smoother. And finally, you monitor the results, collect data, see if those solutions are working, and tweak things as needed.
It's a continuous cycle. Assess, adapt, improve, never stop trying to get better.
That's it. And MCDP 10 stresses that everyone needs to be involved in this process. Marines at all levels should be encouraged to point out problems, suggest solutions, and contribute to making things better.
Giving Marines the power to take ownership of the process, to make those improvements, no matter their rank.
Absolutely. Building a culture where everyone is empowered to contribute to continuous improvement, that's how you make sure the logistics system stays adaptable, efficient, and effective, no matter what challenges come up. In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to shift gears a bit. We're going to talk about something that goes beyond the technical aspects of logistics' moral considerations and how they influence everything we do.
Welcome back, Marine. For this last part of our MCDP 10 deep dive, we're shifting gears. We've covered the systems, the strategies, the need for innovation in Marine Corps logistics. But now we're talking about something more than just the technical stuff. We're going to get into moral considerations.
Right on. We've already said logistics is the backbone of the Marine Corps, but MCDP 10 takes it a step further, wants us to really think about the ethical side of every logistical decision.
So it's not just about getting those supplies to the right place at the right time. It's about doing it in a way that reflects what the Marine Corps is all about, its values, its principles.
Exactly. MCDP 10 reminds us that there's a human element to logistics. Every decision impacts real people. The Marines we support, civilians we encounter, even the folks involved in those global supply chains that keep the Corps going.
That's a pretty powerful idea. So how does MCDP 10 guide Marines to make ethical choices in the field?
It highlights several key principles. It calls it moral logistics, and one of the biggest ones is respect for human dignity. That means treating everyone with respect, no matter their rank, nationality, or their role in the conflict.
So handling prisoners of war, interacting with locals in a village, even how you manage your own Marines, it's all about acting with compassion and integrity.
Right. Another principle is stewardship of resources.
Not just avoiding waste, but being accountable for the equipment and supplies you're given, making sure those resources are used wisely and effectively.
Exactly. Those resources come from the nation. We've got to use them responsibly. And it's not just physical things like ammo or fuel. It's time, manpower, even information.
Wasting any of that can have a negative impact on the mission, for sure. What else does MCDP 10 emphasize?
Fairness is a big one. How we distribute supplies, allocate transportation, it's got to be fair. Resources should be given out based on need and what the mission requires, not favoritism or personal gain.
Playing by the rules, making sure everyone gets a fair shot, not letting biases affect decisions.
You got it. And last but not least, MCDP 10 talks about accountability.
Taking responsibility for your actions, as an individual and as a team. Owning up to mistakes, reporting wrongdoing, maintaining those high ethical standards, even when it's tough.
Exactly. These principles of moral logistics, they give us the ethical framework to guide our choices. They help us navigate tough situations, those moral dilemmas that can pop up in the field. It's not just about avoiding bad stuff, it's about actively trying to do good.
So it's not just about preventing harm, it's about using logistics to have a positive impact whenever possible.
That's the idea. Think about providing aid after a natural disaster, helping with reconstruction, even just building relationships with local populations by being respectful of their culture.
Logistics can be a real force for good. As Marines, we have that responsibility.
Absolutely. And those positive actions, they have a ripple effect. They build trust, create partnerships, and they contribute to a more peaceful, stable world.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. MCDP 10 is more than just a technical manual. It's a roadmap for how the Corps approaches logistics and how that reflects our core values. It's got something for every Marine, no matter what you do or what your rank is.
Logistics, it's the backbone of the Marine Corps. It lets us project power, stay in the fight, and get the job done.
And as we've learned, it's about a lot more than just moving stuff around. It's about supporting each other, holding ourselves to the highest standards, and making a positive impact on the world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us as we explored MCDP 10.
And to all the Marines out there, thank you for your service. You're what makes the Corps the incredible force that it is. Semper Fi. Until next time, Marines, keep learning, keep striding, and keep upholding those values that make the Marine Corps the best.